The rusty nail smelled like stale synth whiskey and old blood. Vince Callahan wiped down the bar with a rag that had seen better decades, his cybernetic arm whirring softly as he polished the same spot for the third time. The jukebox in the corner hummed a distorted synthwave track, the kind that made the regulars feel like they were back in the 80s, before the Corps turned the world into a neon hellscape. Outside, the neon glow of Detroit's skyline bled through the grimy windows, casting long shadows across the scarred wooden tables. The place was empty, except for Rook, who sat at the end of the bar, his massive frame hunched over a glass of something black and viscous that Vince didn't ask about. Rook didn't drink often. When he did, it was never good news. Vince slid another glass under the tap, filled it with the cheapest swill he had, Neon Dream, the kind of liquor that tasted like battery acid and regret, and set it in front of himself. He didn't bother offering Rook a refill. The man had been nursing the same drink for 20 minutes. "You're gonna wear a hole in that glass," Vince muttered, nodding at the way Rook's cybernetic fingers tapped against the rim. Rook didn't look up. "They're back." Vince exhaled through his nose, a sound somewhere between a laugh and a growl. Heh. Saw 'em. Two men in sleek, corporate-cut suits had been lurking outside all evening, their polished shoes out of place on the cracked sidewalk. They weren't locals. They weren't even the usual kind of corporate goons. These were the kind that smiled too much, the kind that carried briefcases in one hand and pistol grips in the other. The Boardroom. Vince had known this was coming. He'd been ignoring their calls for weeks, polite at first, then increasingly less so. Then came the letters, all legalese and threats, delivered by couriers who looked like they'd never set foot in a place like the Nail. And now, the muscle. "3 of them," Rook said, finally lifting his gaze. His visor reflected the flickering neon, hiding his eyes but not the tension in his jaw. Vince grunted. "Heh, a Meeks. Should have sent 4. Rook didn't smile. "They're not here to ask nice." Vince tossed the rag onto the counter and reached beneath it. The sawed-off shotgun was right where it always was. He didn't pull it out. Not yet. "They want me to franchise." "They want you to bend the knee," Rook corrected. Vince poured himself another finger of Neon Dream and knocked it back. The burn was immediate, sharp. "I ain't kneeling for nobody." Rook's hand flexed. "They're not going to stop at asking." "I know." Silence settled between them, thick as the smoke hanging over the pool table. The jukebox switched tracks, something slower, something that sounded like a dirge. Vince had known Rook for years. The man was a ghost when he wanted to be, a one-man war when he didn't. He didn't ask for help, ever. But tonight, Vince could see the question in the way Rook's shoulders tensed, in the way his fingers twitched like they were itching for his shotgun. Vince hated asking, hated needing it, but he wasn't stupid. "They made an offer," Vince said, voice low. "The first time was all smiles and handshakes. 'Join the family,' they said. 'Keep the name, keep the bar, just pay the fee.'" He mimicked the slick corporate cadence of the suit who'd first walked through his door. "Think of the exposure, Vince. Think of the synergy." Rook's visor tilted slightly. "And I told them to shove their synergy up their ass." Vince slammed the glass down. It didn't break. Nothing in the Nail broke easy. "Then they sent the lawyers, then the inspectors, then the health and safety violations." He barked a laugh, like this place was ever healthy. Rook's voice was a synthetic growl. "No?" "Now they're done playing nice." Vince reached in his apron pocket and tossed a crumpled piece of paper onto the bar. Rook unfolded it with his cybernetic fingers, the paper groaning under the pressure. It was a photo. The Nail, boarded up. A boardroom sign hanging where Vince's rusted neon should be. "That's not a threat, that's a promise." Vince's cybernetic eye whirred as he focused on the paper. "Yeah, and I ain't keeping it. Rook set the photo down. You want them gone? Vince didn't answer right away. He stared at the grain of the wood, at the initials carved into the bar by 1,000 drunk patrons over the years, at the bullet hole near the register from that time the maelstromers came looking for trouble, or the booth in the back where Lena, stepping razor Dion, once left a knife buried in the table after a particularly bad night. This was his place, his kingdom. Yeah, I want 'em gone. Rook nodded once. Then they're gone. Then should have known it wouldn't be that simple. Rook leaned forward, the exoframe in his armor groaning. But you know it ain't just these three. Vince did. The boardroom wasn't some two-bit operation. They were a conglomerate, a corporate hydra with tentacles in every major city from Night City to New Tokyo. They bought up dive bars like the Nail, slapped on a fresh coat of chrome, and turned them into soulless franchises where the drinks were overpriced and the bartenders were programmed to upsell. They didn't just want his bar, they wanted his pride. And Vince had plenty of that. They'll send more, Rook said. Let 'em. Rook's visor flickered, the HUD inside recalibrating. You're sure about that? Vince met his gaze. I didn't ask your help to back down. Rook was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached for his glass and downed the rest of whatever black poison he'd been nursing. Then we do it my way. Vince knew what that meant. Rook stood, his chair scraping against the floor. Lock the door. The first suit didn't even see Rook coming. Vince watched from the security feed as Rook stepped out the back, his shotgun already in hand. The suit in the alley was leaning against the brick wall, smoking a cigarette like he owned the place. He didn't even have time to scream before Rook's cybernetic fist crashed into his sternum, lifting him clean off the ground. The man hit the pavement with a wet thud, his cigarette rolling into the gutter. Vince didn't flinch. He'd seen worse. The other two were smarter. They heard the commotion and drew their pistols, sleek, corporate-issue things that probably cost more than Vince's entire bar. Rook didn't give them time to aim. His shotgun roared, once, twice, the muzzle flash illuminating the alley in stark white. One suit went down, clutching his knee. The other managed to get off a shot before Rook was on him, slamming him into the wall hard enough to crack the brick. Vince grabbed his sawn-off shotgun and stepped outside just in time to see Rook wrench the pistol from the last suit's hand and pistol whip him into unconsciousness. The alley was quiet again, save for the groans of the wounded. Rook looked up, his visor splattered with blood. That will hold them for a night. Vince spat on the pavement. Yeah, till the next batch shows up. Rook wiped his cybernetic hand on his thigh, leaving a streak of red. Then we make sure the next batch gets the message. I know they ain't gonna stop. No, but they'll think twice before sending amateurs again.
Vince almost smiled. Almost. What's your rate? Rook holstered his pistol. You ever let me run a tab? No. Then we're square. Vince should have known. Rook didn't do favors. He did business. And right now, business was keeping the Nail standing. Vince nodded toward the unconscious suits. What do we do with them? Rook grabbed the collar of the nearest one and dragged him toward the dumpster. We send them back with a souvenir. Vince watched as Rook pulled a breaching charge from his belt and slapped it onto the dumpster's lid. You're gonna blow up my trash can? Your trash can's gonna blow up them, Rook corrected. He armed the charge with a press of his thumb. Call it a warning. Vince shook his head but didn't argue. He went back inside, grabbed the photo of the franchise Nail, and lit it with a Zippo. He dropped it into the dumpster just as Rook hit the detonator. The explosion rocked the alley, flames licking at the night sky. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm wailed. Rook dusted off his hands. That'll do. Vince stared at the fire for a long moment, then turned back to the bar, flipping a sign on the door to closed. They're gonna come back harder next time, Vince said. Rook followed him inside. Good. Vince poured them both another drink. This time, Rook took it. The next morning, Vince was wiping down the bar when the news feed on the old TV behind him flickered to life. A breaking report. Local business owner assaulted by unknown assailants. The footage was grainy, but Vince recognized the alley, recognized the suits, recognized the message. The reporter droned on about corporate intimidation and police investigations, but Vince wasn't listening. He was watching the ticker at the bottom of the screen, where the stock price for the Boardroom had taken a sudden sharp dip. Rook sat in his usual spot, his helmet off for once, revealing the jagged scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. He took a sip of his drink, actual whiskey this time, the good stuff, and set it down. "They'll be back," he said. Vince nodded. "Yeah, but not today." Rook's sardonic eye glowed faintly in the dim light. "You really gonna burn it all down for this place?" Vince looked around, at the scars on the walls, at the names carved into the wood, at the jukebox still playing that damn synthwave track. "Yeah," he said, "I am." Rook didn't argue. He just raised his glass. Vince clinked his against it. The Rusty Nail wasn't just a bar. It was the last free place in the city. And Vince would be damned if he let some corporate vultures take that away. The Rusty Nail smelled like bleach and gunpowder, then scrubbed at the bloodstain on the alley side door with a rag that had long since given up any pretense of being clean. The early morning light filtering through the grimy windows was the kind of gray that made Detroit look like a city perpetually recovering from a hangover. The jukebox was silent for once, replaced by the occasional drip-drip of a leaky faucet and the hum of the neon sign outside, which had flickered back to life sometime after 3 a.m. Rook sat at the bar, his helmet off, remembering the jagged scar that cut across his temple and the cold, unblinking cybonic eye that whirred softly as it adjusted to the dim light. His exo-frame hissed occasionally, the hydraulics cooling after last night's work. A half-empty mug of black coffee sat in front of him, untouched. Vince didn't bother to ask him if he wanted a refill. Rook wasn't the type to drink coffee for the taste. Vince tossed the rag into a bucket of murky water and leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You ever think we're getting too old for this shit?" Rook didn't look up from the tablet he'd been scrolling through. "No." Vince grunted. That tracked. Rook didn't think much about anything that involved bullets, breaching charges, or body counts. But Vince had been up all night, turning last night's fight over in his head like a stone in his pocket. The Boardroom wasn't just some two-bit operation. They were a machine, and machines didn't stop just because you bloodied a few hair gears. "They're gonna come back," Vince said, voicing the thought that had been gnawing at him since the dumpster fire. Rook's symphonic fingers tapped against the tablet screen. "Yeah. And next time they won't send rent-a-thugs. They'll send lawyers." That got Rook's attention. His good eye, sharp, dark, and human, flicked up to meet Vince's. "Lawyers are worse." Vince barked a laugh. "Damn right they are." He reached under the bar and pulled out a bottle of something that wasn't technically whiskey, but it'd do in a pinch. He didn't bother with a glass. "We need to cover our asses." Rook's scar twitched. "You want to talk to him?" "Hell no." Vince took a swig straight from the bottle. "I want to annoy him." Rook's symbolic eyebrow, if you could call it a ridged metal plate over his eye socket, rose fractionally. "How?" Vince wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "We send him a letter." Rook stared at him. "A cease and desist? Official-like. Make it sound all legal and your shit. Buy some time." Rook was silent for a long moment. Then slowly he said, "You want to write them a letter?" "Not me." Vince already shaking his head. "I ain't got the patience for that corporate bullshit. But I know a guy." Rook's symbolic finger stilled on the tablet. "A guy?" "An AI," Vince corrected. "Name's Lex. Runs out of an old server farm downtown. Does legal docs, contracts, that kind of thing. Cheap, fast, and untraceable." Rick's symbolic eye whirred as it focused on Vince. "You trust an AI to handle this?" Vince shrugged. "I trust an AI more than I trust a corporate lawyer, and at least the machine ain't gonna sell me out for a promotion." Rook considered this, then with a grunt, he nodded. "Fine, but we make it good." Vince grinned, sharp and humorless. "Oh, it'll be good. We'll make it sound like we got a whole team of high-priced suits ready to bury them in paperwork. He grabbed his phone from the pocket of his apron and thumbed through his contacts. Hey, Lex, it's Vince. Yeah, the one with the bar. I need a favor. Lex's voice was smooth, synthetic, and just a little too cheerful, like a customer service rep who had never once encountered an actual customer. Ooh, someone's in trouble. Shut up and listen. Vince put the phone on speaker and set it down on the bar between him and Rook. The Boardroom is trying to muscle me into franchising. Sent some goons last night. Rook helped convince him to leave. Ah, so this is a hostile cease and desist. My favorite kind. All right, lay it on me. What's the play? We want it to sound like we got lawyers. Big ones. The kind that bill by the second and smile while they ruin your life. Delicious. And the goal? Buy us time, Rook said, his voice a low growl. Make them think twice about sending more muscle. Got it. Intimidation via legalese. I love it. What's the bar's full name and address? Vince rattled it off, along with the names of the suits from last night, what few they had managed to get before Rook put him down. And the recipient? The Boardroom's legal department, Vince said. Address should be on their last threat letter. Hold on. He dug through the pile of mail he'd been ignoring for weeks and pulled out a sleek corporate envelope. Here, the Boardroom Corporation, Legal Division, 200 floor, Arasaka Plaza, Night City. Oh, fancy. Arasaka Plaza. Someone's got taste. All right, I'll make it extra official. How spicy do you want this letter?
Vince glanced at Rook. Spicy enough to make their in-house counsel choke on their soy latte? Say no more. There was a brief pause, the sound of digital fingers typing at impossible speeds. All right, how's this for an opener? To whom it may concern at the Boardroom Incorporated. Too weak, Rook interrupted. They don't care about whom it may concern. Make it personal. Ooh, I like him, Lex said. All right, how about to the legal vultures at the Boardroom Incorporated, and specifically to the over-caffeinated, under-ethical team responsible for the harassment of Vincent Callahan and his establishment, the Rusty Nail. Vince smirked. That'll do. Lex continued. Be advised that all attempts to coerce, intimidate, or otherwise strong-arm Mr. Callahan into joining your soulless corporate conglomerate have been documented, recorded, and, where necessary, physically rebutted. Rook nodded approvingly. Any further attempts to interfere with Mr. Callahan's business, including but not limited to legal threats, physical intimidation, or sending more poorly trained goons to his establishment, will result in immediate legal action. This includes, but is not limited to, lawsuits for harassment, defamation, emotional distress, and— Wait, Vince interrupted. Add in something about racketeering. Ooh, I like the way you think. And potential violations of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, given your company's well-documented history of aggressive expansion tactics. How's that? Perfect, Vince said. Should the Boardroom Incorporated fail to cease and desist all hostile actions against the Rusty Nail and its owner, we will pursue all available legal remedies, up to and including public exposure of your company's questionable business practices. Rook cleared his throat. Add in a line about physical retaliation being met with equal force. Lex paused. You want me to threaten them? Not a threat, Rook said. A promise. I do love a good veiled threat. How's this? Please note that while Mr. Callahan prefers to resolve this matter through legal channels, he and his associates are fully prepared to defend his establishment by any means necessary. Further escalation will be met with proportional response. Vince grinned. That'll do it. This letter serves as your only warning. Consider your next move carefully. And for the grand finale, sincerely, Vincent Callahan, owner, The Rusty Nail, represented by Thompson, Whitmore, and Associates. Vince blinked. Who the hell is Thompson, Whitmore, and Associates? They don't exist, Lex said, sounding far too pleased with themselves. But by the time the boardroom's legal team figures that out, you'll have bought yourself a week, maybe 2 if they're slow. Vince chuckled. You're a beautiful machine, Lex. I know. All right, I'll send it off now. Oh, and Vince. Yeah. You owe me 20 cred. And the drink next time you're downtown. Yeah, send the bill. The line went dead. Vince looked at Rook. Thompson, Whitmore and Associates? Rook took a sip of his coffee. Actual coffee this time, not the synth swill Vince usually served. Sounds expensive. Damn right it does. Vince grabbed the bottle again and took another swig. Now we wait. Rook's cybernetic eye flickered as he pulled up the news feed in his tablet. They'll respond. Yeah, but not today. The response came faster than expected. Vince was halfway through restocking the shelf behind the bar when his phone buzzed. He wiped his hands on his apron and picked it up, already knowing who it was. The email was from the Boardroom Incorporated Legal Division. The subject line read, Cease and Desist Notice, The Rusty Nail. He opened it and read aloud. Dear Mr. Callahan, thank you for your correspondence. The Boardroom Incorporated denies any wrongdoing and considers your allegations to be without merit. However, in the spirit of good faith, we are willing to revisit our previous offer. Should you choose to join our franchise network, all past misunderstandings will be forgiven, and you will receive a generous signing bonus. Please respond within 7 days to avoid further complications. Sincerely, Harold Vexley, Esquire, Senior Counsel, The Boardroom Incorporated. Vince snorted. Harold Vexley. Sounds like a guy who irons his socks. Rook's cybernetic fingers drummed against the bar. They're calling our bluff. Of course they are, but they gotta prove we're bluffing. That takes time. Rook nodded. Time we can use. Vince poured himself another drink. To Thompson, Whitmore and Associates. Rook clinked his mug against the bottle. May they build like demons. The Rusty Nail's door chimed as it opened, letting in a blast of cold air and the sound of boots on the sticky floor. Both men turned to see Lena, stepping razor Dion, step inside. Her purple hair was damp from the rain outside. She took one look at Vince and Rook and arched an eyebrow. You two look like you're planning a funeral. Whose is it? The Boardroom's, if we're lucky. Lena's heterochromatic eyes, one ice blue and the other glowing amber, flicked between them. Aha, heard about last night. News travels fast, Vince muttered. So do corpses, Lena said, accepting the drink. You really think a letter's gonna stop 'em? I shrugged. No, but it'll slow 'em down. And every second they're not breathing down my neck is a second I can use to figure out how to bury them for good. Lena took a sip, then set the glass down. You need help? Vince and Rook exchanged a glance. Always, Vince said. Lena smirked. Good, 'cause I hate corporate bars. Rook's visor flickered. We're gonna need more than letters. Vince grinned. Yeah, we are. Lena pulled a data spike from her pocket and tossed it on the bar. Vince picked up the spike and turned it over in his fingers. What's this? Insurance. A little something I liberated from a boardroom location last week. Customer lists, franchise agreements, a lot of dirty laundry. Vince's cybernetic eye whirred as he looked at her. You planning a heist? Lena smirked was all teeth. No, I'm planning a war. Rook's cybernetic hand flexed. I like wars. Vince downed the rest of his drink and slammed the glass down. All right, kids, let's ruin someone's day.
The kind of naughty that gets executives indicted, Lex purred. Forced buyouts, intimidation, outright fraud in some cases. They've been strong-arming small businesses into franchising for years. But, and this is the fun part, they've been sloppy about covering their tracks. Lena, the lips curled into a sharp smile. You've got proof? Oh, I've got hints of proof, Lex corrected. Internal memos, emails, a few recorded conversations that definitely sound like extortion. But the real goods, those are locked up tight in their Detroit server farm. Vince exhaled sharply. Of course they are. Don't sound so disappointed, Lex chided. I did find you the address and the lovely little security vulnerability in their firewalls. But if you want the smoking gun, you're gonna have to go in physically. Lena's knife disappeared into her sleeve. Where's the farm? Lex rattled off an address in the industrial sector of Detroit, a place where the Corps had gobbled up old warehouses and turned them into data fortresses. It's guarded, obviously, but not well guarded. They're arrogant, think no one would dare. Vince glanced at Lena. She was already standing, pulling her jacket on. I'll go. Rook's cybernetic hand flexed. You need backup? Please, this is a one-woman job. Vince scowled. You sure about that? Last time you went in alone, you came back with a bullet in your thigh. Lena tapped the hilt of her knife. Last time I was in a hurry. This time I've got finesse. Rook's visor tilted slightly. You're going to walk into a corporate data farm and just take what you need? Lena's amber eye glowed brighter as she met his gaze. I'm gonna ghost in and out. They won't even know I was there. Vince didn't like it, but he also knew Lena well enough to recognize that look in her eyes, the one that said she was already 3 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. Fine, but if you get caught— She won't, Lex interrupted. I'll loop their cameras. You've got 15-minute window. In and out. Easy. Lena adjusted the neural interface at her temple. I'll be back before lunch. Vince grabbed a data spike from behind the bar and tossed it to her. Bring me something that'll bury them. Lena caught it with a flick of her wrist. Consider it done. The boardroom's data farm was a squat, windowless building, sandwiched between 2 abandoned warehouses, its exterior marked only by a small corporate logo above the reinforced door. No guards outside, no visible cameras, just the quiet hum of servers and the occasional flicker of a security light. Arrogant, Lex had said. Lena could work with arrogant. She crouched on the fire escape of the building across the street, her cyberdeck already interfaced with the local network. Lex's voice was a whisper in her earpiece. All right, sweet cheeks, you're in. Their external security is a joke. I'm spoofing the camera feeds now. You've got 14 minutes. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The roof access was unlocked. Sloppy. She dropped onto the server farm's roof, her boots making no sound on the metal grating. A vent led down into the heart of the building, its screws already loosened. Maintenance had been lazy. She pried it open and slipped inside, her body moving like smoke. The interior was a maze of server racks, their lights blinking in the dark like a field of artificial stars. The air was cold, sterile, the kind of place that didn't expect intruders. Lena moved silently, her cyberdeck guiding her toward the core server where the boardroom's dirty laundry was stored. Third rack on the left, Lex murmured. The one with the red light, that's your target. Lena didn't hesitate. She knelt in front of the rack, her fingers flying over the access panel. The lock clicked open. Oh, they did upgrade their encryption, Lex said, sounding almost impressed. Good thing I also upgraded your deck last week. Lena plugged in, her vision flashing as the cyberdeck synced with the server. Data streams flooded her HUD, and she sifted through them with practiced ease. Found it, she muttered. Grab everything marked Franchise AC. That's where they're hiding the bodies. Lena's fingers danced over the interface, copying files onto the data spike. They've got everything, threats, bribes, even a few recorded negotiations that sound an awful lot like blackmail. Jackpot, Lex hissed. That's the stuff. Keep going. A sudden beep in her earpiece made Lena freeze. Small problem, Lex said, their voice suddenly tense. Someone just triggered a security alert. Not sure if it's automated or if they've got a real body on site. Lena's pulse didn't so much as hitch. How long? You've got 3 minutes before someone might check the cameras, maybe. Lena yanked the spike free and slotted it into her deck. "Copying now." The data transferred in seconds. She ejected the spike and tucked it into her jacket just as the distant clank of a door echoed through the server farm. "Lena!" "I know." She was already moving, melting back into the shadows as footsteps approached. A guard, one lone, bored-looking rent-a-car, wandered into the aisle, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Lena pressed herself against the server rack, her breath silent, her body still. The guard paused, scratching his head. "Word. Thought I heard something." Lena didn't move, didn't breathe. The guard shrugged and turned away. "Must be the rats." Lena waited until his footsteps faded before slipping back toward the vent. "Told you. Ghost." "Show off," Lex muttered. "Now move. You've got 2 minutes before the camera loop resets." She was back on the roof before the guard had finished his rounds. The Rusty Nail's door chimed as Lena stepped in, the data spike held between her fingers like a trophy. Vince looked up from the glass he'd been glassing and raised an eyebrow. "That was fast." Lena tossed the spike on the bar. "Told you." Rook's visor flickered as he picked it up. "No trouble?" Lena smirked. "They didn't even see me." Vince grabbed the data spike and slotted it into the terminal behind the bar. The screen flickered to life, filling with files, emails, memos, audio logs. He scrolled through a few, his cybernetic eye whirring as he read. "Holy shit, they've got everything. Threats, bribes, even a few accidents that happened to bar owners who refused to sell." Rook's cybernetic hand clenched into a fist. "Enough to bury them?" Vince grinned. "Enough to crucify them." Lena leaned against the bar, crossing her arms. "So, what's the play?" Vince looked at Rook, then at Lena. "We leak it." "Oh, I like this plan," Lex chimed in from the phone still sitting on the bar. "Public humiliation and legal trouble? Delicious." Vince nodded. "We send it to the press, the corporate watchdogs. Hell, we blast it across every net form from here to Night City. The boardroom can't ignore this, not when it's everywhere." Rook's voice was a low growl. "They'll come after us." Lena's knife reappeared in her hand. She spun it, once, twice. "Let 'em." Vince grabbed his phone and dialed Lex. "Are you still there?" "Always," Lex said. "Get this to everyone. Make sure it sticks." "With pleasure." There was a brief pause. "Oh, and Vince?" "Yeah?" "You might want to stock up on popcorn. This is going to be fun to watch."
Vince hung up and looked at the two of them. Rook, a mountain of cybernetic fury, and Lena, a blade in the dark. "All right, let's ruin a corporation." Lena smirked. "Thought you'd never ask." The Rusty Nail was alive with the kind of energy that only came when you just stuck it to the man. Vince stood behind the bar, his cybernetic arm whirring as he polished a glass that didn't need polishing. Lena leaned against the counter, her purple hair catching the neon glow from outside, her Tonto knife gleaming as she cleaned it with a rag. Rook sat in his usual spot, his exoframe hissing softly as he scrolled through the data spike on his tablet. The jukebox played a triumphant synthwave anthem, the kind that made you feel like you'd just won a war. Vince's phone sat on the bar, Lex's voice crackling through the speaker. "All right, kids, I've got the file packaged and ready to go. All the dirty laundry, all the broken laws, all the beautiful evidence of the boardroom's little extortion racket. Where do you want me to send it?" Lena smirked. "Everywhere." "Oh, I like the way you think," Lex purred. "But be specific. I can't just blast this to the entire net. Well, I could, but that's how you start a riot." Vince grabbed a notepad from under the bar and scribbled down a list. "Start with the franchisees. Every bar, every club, every dive the boardroom strong-armed into joining them. Then hit the press, the corporate watchdogs, the legal blogs, the underground blogs. Make sure it's everywhere." Scandalous," Lex said. "I'll even throw in a little anonymous tip to the Night City Journal. They love corporate corruption stories." Rook's visor flickered. "Make sure it's untraceable." "Please," Lex scoffed. "I'm insulted you even had to say that." "All right, sending now." Vince poured himself a drink, actual whiskey this time, not the synth swill he served to the regulars. "All right, let's see how long it takes for the shit to hit the fan." Lena raised her glass. To the boardroom and their impending implosion. Rook clinked his mug against hers. May their lawyers bill them into oblivion. Vince was about to take a sip when the door to the Rusty Nail burst open. The men who stumbled in weren't the same polished suits from before. These were thugs, the kind of muscle you hired when you were desperate and didn't care about subtlety. 4 of them, all armed, 2 with pistols, 1 with a crowbar, and the last carrying a jerry can of accelerant. The biggest one, with a brick wall-like face, grinned. "Which one of you's Callahan?" Vince set his glass down slowly. "That be me." The brute tossed the jerry can to one of his lackeys. "Boss says burn it down." Lena's knife was in her hand before the words had fully left his mouth. Rook stood, his exoframe flaring to life with a hiss. Vince didn't move. He didn't need to. Rook stepped forward, his cybernetic hand flexing. "You boys lost?" The brute laughed. "Nah, we're right where we're supposed to be." He pulled a pistol from his waistband. "Last chance. Walk away or we burn this dump to the ground." Rook's visor glowed red. Wrong answer. The first thug lunged with the crowbar. Rook caught his wrist, twisted, and snapped it like a dry branch. The man screamed as Rook wrenched the crowbar free and swung it into the second thug's ribs. Bone cracked. The brute with the pistol fired. The shot went wide as Rook charged, slamming him into the wall hard enough to leave a dent. The pistol clattered to the floor. Lena moved like a shadow, her knife flashing. One thug went down clutching his throat. The other barely had time to raise his gun before she kicked it out of his hand and drove her knee into his gut. The last thug, the one with the jerry can, tried to run. Rook caught him by the collar and threw him through a table. Glass shattered. Vince watched, sipping his whiskey, as Rook systematically dismantled the remaining thugs. A punch to the jaw here, a thrown stool there, a well-placed kick that sent one crashing into the jukebox. The synthwave anthem cut off with a screech. The brute with the pistol tried to crawl away. Rook grabbed him by the ankle and dragged him back, slamming his face into the bar. "You were saying?" He groaned, blood dripping from his nose. "Fuck you!" Rook head-butted him. "No, fuck you." Lena wiped her knife on her jacket and sheathed it. "That was almost too easy." Vince set his glass down. Well, they were in a hurry." Rook dropped the last thug, unconscious, onto the floor and turned back to the bar. "They won't be the last." Vince nodded. "No, but they'll be the last today." The thugs were dragged out back and left in the alley for the cops to find, or not. Vince didn't much care. He locked the door, flipped the sign to closed, and poured 3 more drinks. Lena leaned against the counter, her breath barely elevated. "You think they'll be back?" Vince shook his head. Not on this day." Rook's visor flickered as he checked his tablet. "Lex says the data drop hit. The franchisees are lawyering up." As if on cue, Vince's phone buzzed. He answered without looking. "Lex, please tell me you've got good news." "Oh, Vince, my favorite human," Lex said, their voice dripping with satisfaction. "The boardroom is screwed. The franchisees are lawyering up, the press is having a field day, and their stock just took a nosedive. Word on the net is they've called off all actions against the Nail." "Just like that. Just like that," Lex confirmed. "Turns out when you've got 100 small business owners suing you for extortion, you don't have time to mess with one stubborn barkeep." Lena raised her glass. "To us." Rook clinked his mug against hers. "To not burning down." Vince downed his whiskey in one go. "Damn right." The jukebox sputtered back to life, the synthwave anthem resuming mid-chorus. Vince turned it up. For the first time in weeks, the rusty nail felt like his again. The next morning, Vince stood outside the nail, watching the sunrise paint the Detroit skyline in shades of orange and gray. The air smelled like rain and exhaust, the usual scent of the city. Rook leaned against the wall, his exo-frame silent for once. "They'll be back." Vince didn't look at him. "Yeah, but not today." Lena stepped out, her hair still damp from a shower, her jacket zipped up against the morning chill. "You really think this is over?" Vince lit a cigarette, the flame flickering in the dawn light. "Nah, but we bought ourselves some time, and that's enough for now." Rook's visor glinted. "What's next?" Vince exhaled a cloud of smoke. "Next, we keep pouring drinks. We keep pissing off Corp.